Let's try the clickers. Let's see where you are on a quiz related to sleep disorders, sleep in general, and then actually this is called a sleep IQ test. And the average score, by the way, there are 12 questions, and I think I saw recently that the average score on these is 5.5 out of 12 correct. 5.5 out of 12. So the challenge has been thrown down. You, ready? You get to keep your own score, obviously, because we're going to use this clicker, and so only you know what you do. This one we're going to do very quickly, but the answer, you can just now put it in right now, and you should see yours show up. A is B. A is true, B is false. And A is B, and A is true. Wow, that's weird. A is true, B is false. Yeah, we're going to do that. Anybody else have another question on, yep?
How to control your dreams.
Ooh, I'll give you the quickest, simplest way. Oh, hold on, I can't do that. I'll tell you what, yeah, to control your dreams is one thing. How many would like the simplest way to remember your dreams? Would you like a little trick? If you don't remember your dreams, I'll give you the trick. But to control is a little different, but we'll talk about that. There is anything else you want to know about? Huh? What causes dreams within dreams? Oh, that is way cool. Dreams within dreams. Okay, here we go. Ready? The answer to this one. All right, true or false? The answer to this one, by the way, is... The answer to this one is false. During sleep, your brain does not rest. In fact, some of the most amazing things happen during sleep that we're going to talk about, and we'll show you a little bit. Number 2, you cannot learn to function normally with 1 or 2 fewer hours of sleep than you need. Everybody's born with a certain, let's say, a certain amount of sleep. And you cannot learn to function normally with 1 or 2 fewer hours of sleep than you need. True or false? Let's see if I can get out of this. The answer, by the way, to that one is true. You cannot learn to function normally. Because why? Ooh, we're going to answer that one in just a minute. Boredom. Number 3, boredom makes you feel sleepy, even if you have had enough sleep. So write down what you think. True or false? Boredom makes you feel sleepy, even if you have had enough sleep. True or false? Does boredom... Oh, it worked. It's just, let's just try it again. So you cannot learn, and we know what that answer is. That one, number 2, we said is true. We said number 3, boredom makes you feel sleepy. And so you could do A or B, and I think it might just be overpowering the system. So the answer to this one is false. Yeah. Boredom, in essence, does something else. Boredom, just like driving, does something, and the best way to refer to it, experts in sleep just simply say it starts to unmask something. That is, when you're bored, it doesn't make you sleepy. What it does is it reveals or unmasks the fact that you have been or are under what we call sleep. You don't have enough sleep. You're in sleep deficit. Number 4, resting in bed with your eyes closed. Resting in bed with your eyes closed, did I already read this one? Cannot satisfy your body's need for sleep. Resting in bed with your eyes closed cannot satisfy your body's need for sleep. So if you laid in bed all night with just your eyes closed and resting, that cannot satisfy your body's need for sleep. And the answer to that one is? Yeah, interesting. I'm just going to pull this thing out in a minute. The answer to that one is true. True because, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, something occurs during sleep that requires you to actually go into a stage. And I'll tell you what that is in a minute. Number 5, snoring is not harmful as long as it doesn't disturb others or wake you up. Snoring, true or false, is not harmful as long as it doesn't disturb others or wake you up. How many have... never mind. All right, let's just end this baby. Close it, because I'm tired of it. All right. That one is false. How many got it right? False. Really? How many got it wrong? Yeah. Keep your track of yours. Ready? We'll talk about snoring and what it actually signifies and why snoring has very important consequences. And if you know someone who snores regularly and frequently, it can be a sign of some other issues, especially something known as what? Sleep apnea, yeah, where people don't do what at the same time? Yeah, as soon as I'll tell you what that is in a minute. Everyone dreams nightly, true or false? Number 6, everyone dreams nightly, true or false? The answer? True. Everyone dreams nightly. 7, the older you get, the fewer hours of sleep you need. True or false? Write it down. The older you get, the fewer hours of sleep you need. So people that are 60 compared to when they were 20. The answer is? False. It's actually something that's pretty genetic, built into you, amount of sleep you need. Number 8, most people don't know when they are sleepy. True or false? Ready? Most people don't know when they are sleepy. True or false? Put people in, hook them up, and I'll talk a little bit about some of these sleep clinics. And people will be talking about everything, and you'll ask them how sleepy they are, and they say not very, and like within 1 minute they're asleep. It's very interesting. So the answer to number 8 is true. Most people don't know. And it's a strange phenomenon of our brain. We'll talk about it. Raising the volume of your radio will help you stay awake while driving. The answer is false. Sleep disorders, 10, are mainly due to worry or psychological problems. Sleep disorders are mainly due to worry or psychological problems. The answer is false. Yep. There's other things that actually sleep disorders are about. We'll talk. The human body, number 11, never adjusts to night shift work. How many have ever worked overnight shifts and we had to stay up and work? And just a few of you. Huh? The human body never adjusts to night shift work. True or false? True. The answer is true. Weird, huh? By the way, there are a lot of people who are on night shift work and they stay there a long time. My neighbor is one. She goes and I think she's a nurse at a hospital or something, and she works overnight shifts, and she was telling us she prefers that. But if she gets off that, she'll go right back to a day staying awake and sleeping at night. If she stays off it, she immediately goes right back. But anyway, and then number 12, most sleep disorders go away even without treatment. True or false? The answer is false. So anybody beat that national average? We get more than 6? Good. All right, good. Then here's what we're going to do today. We're going to spend some time looking at a very cool topic of consciousness and awareness, and it's about this thing that we are currently all of us engaged in, and we're just simply all of us are conscious right now. But the question comes up for a lot of researchers and people in this field and in other fields when they ask the question, how do you define what consciousness is? It becomes a little bit tricky. But see, the idea that we just simply live with it, we are conscious at this moment, is still a very slippery concept. To be conscious is something that our culture and other cultures use to identify whether people are in fact, let's say, alive. That is, if you're unconscious, while you're not dead, you're certainly in a very weird place. And there are elements of being unconscious that lead us to go, if you're unconscious and you show other signs, then we're going to call you in what's called a coma or a vegetative state. And there are certain kind of almost ways in which we look at people and identify who is awake, who is conscious, and if you're not conscious, we start to look at some other things to determine whether or not death has occurred. What's one thing we will look at if a person is unconscious that tells us ultimately that they are truly, at least according to our definition, no longer alive? Is there something that we also see for somebody who's unconscious? Remember, a lot of people can be unconscious for a lot of different reasons, but the length of time you spend unconscious, and then whether or not you see brain activity, right? Brain activity is the key for us. So brain death would obviously, for most places and most cultures, would say, well, that's the moment death occurs. When that brain stops sending out good, solid electrical activity up there, and then you have a new flat line, we call that brain death, and that's when they'll unplug everything. But until in between that moment, it's a weird place. That is, there are people in persistent vegetative states that cause a lot of concern for us. And so consciousness is really an interesting place. We would define it as, what does it mean, when we say what does it mean to be conscious. This person, by the way, you don't have to write down her name, Terry Schiavo, if you don't want. How many have ever heard of Terry Schiavo? And you remember Terry's Law in Florida? Terry, and here's the details of her life. She, went back in 1990, when she was 26, she had a cardiac arrest. Was struggling with some eating disorders. Her brain was deprived of oxygen at the time, and she went into what's called a persistent vegetative state. Her husband wanted, 8 years later, by the way, she's in a persistent vegetative state for 8 years, and her husband said, Terry is no longer here. She's gone. She's unconscious. And so he was using an element of consciousness that says when the person's unconscious, he argued, she's gone. Take away the life support. She can't feed herself, she can breathe on her own, but she can't feed herself. And so the idea was, remove the feeding tube, she'll eventually starve to death, because he argued Terry is not here. She died that day. Okay? So, here's what happened next. 3 years after that, they finally agreed with him in April, and they removed the feeding tube. 2 days later, it was resumed, primarily because her family asked to have the feeding tube put back in. 2 years after that, in October of 2003, they removed the feeding tube. 6 days later, Jeb Bush pushed for a law called Terry's Law, and they did restore the feeding tube. A year after that, the Supreme Court struck down that Terry's Law, the Florida Supreme Court. President Bush at the time signed a bill to save Terry a year after that. And then a federal judge ruled that the feeding tube should not be reinserted, and she should be allowed to starve to death, which she did 8 days later, March of 2005. How many remember the story? Some of you are young. Well, the question comes down to this notion of what's consciousness, what's awareness. The husband was arguing she's gone. She's been gone for 15 years now. She doesn't come out of that vegetative state and can't interact with people. She couldn't talk to you. She wouldn't respond if you walked into the room. She wouldn't have any recognition of you. While her eyes may open at certain times, there was probably very little recognition, if any. Now, her mom and parents argued differently. They argued that she was aware at times. She was just stuck in this state, in this almost in-between, and she would show flickers of awareness and smile and see things. An autopsy at the end did reveal that she was effectively blind, so her ability to respond to people may have had to do more with sounds rather than them coming in, but the husband would have said, no, that's not what's happening. She brings up a very important question for us and for people all over. What does it mean to be conscious? You see, if you're aware of things around you, you're conscious right now. You hear my voice, you see and feel and hear the people or the things around you. You know what's going on in your stomach or in your thought life or in your body. And so you're aware of external and internal stimuli, and therefore you're conscious, we would say. That's what it is. It's an awareness of your environment and the things around you. Terry was not, according to many people. So that left us with trying to answer the question, what would you do with Terry when she doesn't show any signs of awareness of stimuli? None, according to some. And then some are, and that was the argument. What is she aware of? And that's it. So most of us never lose consciousness. Is anybody in here, have I asked this question? Well, I think that we had 1 or 2 people in here that lost consciousness for more than, I've been hit by many things, baseballs and golf balls and things like that. And one time, I remember standing there losing consciousness. A guy hit me. I'm playing baseball, and we're in the gym in Colorado. It's snowing outside, so we're practicing inside, and I'm hitting over here with plastic balls. And a guy's hitting real baseballs to the infielders over here, and he rips a line drive that got out of the path, and it came right at me. I didn't know. I'm just standing there like this. The next thing, I'm out. It just went boom, and I went like that. At least I think I did. I don't know what I did. All I remember is I had a baseball like face again, like that golf. Did I tell you about the golf one? Yeah. So now I had a baseball one over here, and I just look up, and people are looking at me. You all right? And I'm like, I think so, and they're all looking at me like I'm grotesque and then I just see this thing growing, and you know how you just see it grow, and I'm going, what happened? The guy goes, and the coach is, oh, I'm so sorry, man, I hit you. I'm like, why? Why would you do that? and he goes, it was an accident. I go, well, why'd you do that? And he goes, Chris, I didn't mean to. It was an accident. Like, oh, okay. Well, does that losing consciousness? And it was just a couple of seconds, really. So you're out. Has anybody lost consciousness for longer than that? Let me see your hands if you've lost consciousness for more than a minute. Oh, more than 5 minutes you've lost. We have about 5 people. Anybody lose consciousness for longer than like a day? Huh. So how long? Yeah. 15 minutes from a hit in the head? No, I'm diabetic. Diabetic, okay. Someone else hit in the head? Yeah.
Concussion in hockey.
Concussion in hockey, yeah. Which is pretty common. It's like the same word. Hockey is based on the word concussion. Someone else for more than how long?
Oh, I've had 4 concussions.
4 concussions. Yeah.
5 minutes. I just remember waking up in the locker room.
Yeah, so you sometimes remember being in. By the way, they've done a study of prisoners, and almost all of them have had at some point concussions and head injuries. I'm not saying anything, but it's more common for prisoners to have experienced at some point head injuries like concussions. Doesn't mean you're going to prison by any means, but it does mean that there's something interesting, and it could be a variety of things. That's just an interesting correlation. Anybody else be longer than like an hour or two? Yeah?
Well, I was in and out
For about 45 minutes. Accident?
I fell longboarding.
Longboarding. Is that what you said? You fell while longboarding. Hit your head. Yeah. And how long? 3 hours. What were you doing? Head injury? Yeah, okay, we'll talk. Yeah, okay. So there are different types of reasons why. Now, here's the thing. Ready? The majority of you have either never lost consciousness or you've lost it only briefly. All right? Only briefly. Like one time I fell, it was another baseball game, but I fell and hit concrete with my head. And I hit, same thing. And people are looking around, it's probably only like 5 seconds. Those kinds of things are not necessarily uncommon. They happen regularly for athletes and others, car accident and injuries. But when we lose, and this happens, something changes. And the good news is the majority of people don't lose consciousness. And the brain is designed in a protective way, and it responds to trauma in certain ways, unless the injury is severe enough. But there's variations. And by the way, when I say you've always been conscious, it doesn't mean that you've always, of course, been aware of a lot of external stimuli, because every night when you sleep, your ability to know what's going on out there is severely compromised. And so you vary, and by the way, you're even being in this classroom today, you're varying, a lot of you, in your level of awareness, aren't you? Some of you are in with me and paying attention, and some of you are somewhere else. And that's a variation, and you do throughout the day, you go like this. On an interesting cycle where you're more awake and more aware and more prone to daydreaming. And so those variations, early theorists have always wondered about these streams. And that's kind of what it's like when they used the word, when William James, 100 and some odd years ago, used the word streams of consciousness, he literally meant it like a stream moves like this and it meanders, and sometimes you're really awake and really aware, and sometimes you're just like, I'm barely here and I'm not as aware, and that kind of varies, and he called it this meandering stream. By the way, Freud was fascinated by the unconscious, that which is going on with you while that's under that stream's current. So if William James talked about the upward stream, what you can see as stream moving, Freud was saying, yeah, but your life is driven by the unconscious, those currents underneath the waves, or those currents underneath the stream that's really moving that stream. Freud was fascinated by that. We'll talk some about him later. So there are different processes that we have, and what that simply means is we can and do alter or change how aware we are. We talked a little bit about the high road, that which you're conscious of. You, when you apply this, if I asked you right now, give me your full attention, listen to me, pay attention. This is very important. You could turn your awareness to me. You'd be concentrating. It's what we call alert wakefulness. It's when you take an exam or play a video game sometimes, you're very much aware and in what we call this high road of awareness. But you can also, throughout the day, find yourself moving into what's called this unconscious autopilot. And this unconscious autopilot is almost as if you're just not paying attention and you're just not aware of a lot of things around you. If you're daydreaming, one example is for people when you drive a stick shift, if you're good at it, when you were first learning to drive a stick shift, were very dangerous because it's really hard. You're concentrating on so much, for example, of trying to shift, that sometimes your road awareness decreases because you got to pay more attention to what you're doing. And today, for those of you that drive a stick shift, you just drive without even thinking, right? I mean, there's just boom, you just go and drive, and you're not even paying attention to doing this. Now, we do little unawareness of things, even when you drive, even in a car, automatic. How many of y'all can drive with little awareness of your driving? How many of y'all have ever driven sometimes, and you actually ended up at a place where you didn't plan on going? It's like you were thinking, and you ended up there. Gosh, a lot of you are raising your hands. That's bad driving. It's actually sometimes, another example would be if you've ever driven, have you ever you're driving and all of a sudden you wake up, so to speak, like you go, good night, I've been driving for 5 minutes and I'm sure I'm stopped and I'm sure I'm doing, but it's like, I've been driving. How many have done that before? Stop it, that's really bad. What's it called, by the way? Highway hypnosis. And we're gonna talk about hypnosis in here tomorrow or on Wednesday next time. And that's what oftentimes happens. You're doing this. It's almost as if you're thinking about one thing, and it's called dissociation, where part of you is driving and another part is over here thinking. And then eventually you go, oh, I got to think about driving because I've been driving without thinking. All right. Daydreaming, some of you are very good at this. My wife is a daydreamer, and she will sometimes just be sitting there I could always tell when she daydreams. Where are the daydreamers? Some of you are very good at this. And all of a sudden, I'm sure most of you, everybody can tell because your eyes stop moving. Have you noticed that? So my wife is just like, and I'll say, hey, Elise, how you doing? And she doesn't smile. Real good. And she'll answer, but she's not there. And be like, hello. And she just sits there in a daydream, and it's fascinating. By the way, that you can't really read this, but all it says is there's this level of alpha brain activity with daydreaming, and it's simply what we call this reduced eye movements associated with some levels of alpha activity. And that's all that says. If you can't, maybe on that screen you can see it, but reduced eye movement, and high levels of alpha activity. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. So, real quickly, do you understand this idea? We vary in our awareness throughout the day. We're not just simply, I'm awake and now I'm alert and here's my day. you go like this, in and out. And by the way, you go in a cycle of a certain level and amount of time throughout the day. If you know that cycle, you'll know why it's so cool to know what that cycle is, because you do a lot of things on this cycle that's kind of weird. And I'll tell you about that in just a minute. So I'm going to skip over this idea of other variations. There are different kinds of consciousness that we just don't have time to talk about, like, for example, shifts that are qualitatively distinct shifts that you experience, but these almost involve things like drugs and fatigue and delirium and what is going on? That thing's shaking. And sensory overload times and brain injury. But again, these are usually weird shifts. The only one we're going to talk about in here is going to be on sleep, because there's a distinct shift that goes on and your amount of awareness is now changed, and how you are aware of things is different. And so we call these altered states. Sleep happens to be one of those examples. All right? All right, so that's where we're heading. We're going to be talking about primarily these variations. And before I get to sleep, I want to talk about some rhythms that we go throughout the day, or even throughout the weeks, that are pretty interesting rhythms, and then we'll jump into sleep. So, or at least we'll talk about it. Okay? Questions?
So I know we're not going to go into it, but yes or no question is it true that like alcohol can cause you to lose consciousness?
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about what alcohol can do, and in fact, alcohol's effect on even sleep and even our awareness of consciousness. But alcohol's a depressant, so enough alcohol will actually shut down key systems of the brain. And in too much, that's called alcohol poisoning, and then you could even die from overdose of alcohol. And so yes, it acts as a strong depressant, and so what it does is it does change things like even sleep and dream cycles. We'll talk a little bit about that too. Yeah. So I'm not going to, there's a line between consciousness and unconsciousness, and I've already mentioned the idea of comas and brain deaths and vegetative states, and where Terry ended up was in a persistent vegetative state. You don't have to worry about this, but I just wanted to bring your attention to the idea that consciousness for most of us involves staying above the line. We're almost always above the line. And the few people that go below were either purposely put there, i.e. you're rendered unconscious, through the actions of a doctor, or for some other reason we might put you down below here in the minimally conscious stage, or some accident has caused you to go into a coma, which oftentimes can lead to brain death or a persistent vegetative state, or somewhere in between, like minimally conscious states. There are people like that who are kind of in between vegetative, but they're somewhat conscious, but we call them minimally conscious, which is where Terry Schiavo's parents were arguing she was. But the evidence was showing she was definitely in a persistent vegetative state. At least that's what the evidence seems to show. So those are just so you know, some of these definitions and some ideas, and we can talk about some if you have any questions. What I'd like to do is talk about biological clocks real quick before we get into sleep. And a biological clock is something that's occurring inside of our brains that's going off on a regular basis, these internal rhythms, we call them. And they are occurring on a regular basis because it's due to chemical mechanisms that are just timed. And these timed chemical mechanisms are found in kind of different parts of the brain, primarily in the thalamus and hypothalamus, and in this region of this kind of midbrain, so to speak, where these clocks are, and even the master clock. Anybody know what the master clock is? Anybody heard of the suprachiasmatic nucleus, this master clock that controls all the other clocks? And it's a cool, it's not blue and it's not a little dot, but it's about in this region right here called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And for some reason, it functions, if you want, as the master clock. All the other clocks in the brain kind of take its cues from this. And this is what regulates a lot of our activity, a lot of our awareness, a lot of the biological rhythms that are occurring. And so, by the way, the brain is encased, and there's nothing that gets into the brain that doesn't come through our senses. And so, what's required is the super clock. The most important thing that it does is it resets itself depending upon daylight, primarily, or light. And so, what's interesting is through your eyes, and even with individuals that don't have perfect vision or could even be blind, light still gets through. And that light getting through reaches in and helps set and reset this clock. So we've taken college students, put them into a place in which there are no clocks and no lights and no ability to know what time it is, and we say, guess what? You're going to live in a cave that's completely, it's lit whenever you want, but it's artificial light. There are no reminders of time, and they want to see what happened to the volunteers that went into this cave and were going to stay there for some period of time. Let's say they said it could be anywhere from 5 days to 10 days. You're going to live in this cave, food, water, everything will be provided for you, but you have no idea of outside light or activities or time, and they wanted to see what would happen to their states of awareness and to their clocks. Anybody know what was one of the most striking things that happened to these individuals that would move into a cave? What would you think would happen to you if you moved in? And by the way, at this point you were told there is no time for, there's no night and day, so to speak, and you just go off your body. When you're tired, you sleep. So that's what people did. They slept only when they were tired. And if they were normally falling asleep at midnight when they went into this cave, what would happen? So they would fall asleep. Let's say that first night they move in, and at midnight they're asleep. And they would sleep a certain amount of time. And they got into this rhythm that was very interesting. Anybody know what happened if they fell asleep at midnight? What tended to happen the second night? What time would they fall asleep the second night? Do you think they would stay consistent? See, what happens is this clock, suprachiasmatic nucleus, it regulates itself. And so if you go to bed at midnight almost every night, it's primarily because this clock is connecting with the outside world, and it's taking in sunlight and it resets. So the next night, if you weren't in this cave, you probably go to bed at midnight. And the following night, and the following night after that, you kind of get this pattern. What were they doing in the cave? There's no light, nothing coming in. Their brains are now unconnected to the world outside of light, and they would go to bed the next night at 1 in the morning. And the next night, what time would they go to sleep? At 2 in the morning. And most people, they realized, cycled, not on a 24-hour cycle like the sun, but instead on about a 24 3/4 cycle, or 25-hour cycle. Isn't that interesting? So if 7 days were gone, they were going to bed at 7 in the morning usually. And so that was an interesting finding that we probably regulate our own internal clock, like when we sleep, according to the super clock, but it's according to the sun. Which is why it's so hard when you travel and get things like jet lag. Okay? That's the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It sets itself according to the kind of sunlight out there, and we go into these rhythms or clocks. So let me show you about the clocks real quick. 3 clocks to be aware of. Some that they're kind of have very little influence on us, and their effects are pretty minor, but we do see, like infradian. Remember, the word dian is the word for day. So infra meaning less frequently, not as frequent as a day. Anybody know a biological clock that's not as frequent as a day? It happens like, let's say, every 7 days or every 28 days. Well, the female menstrual cycle would be an infra cycle. Tooth pain, they think, might be on one of those. I don't know why, but sometimes if you're more susceptible to tooth pain. Symptoms of depression may very well be on some sort of longer or less frequently than a day cycle. There's even a kind of depression called seasonal affect, and it seems to come with the seasons in the northern hemispheres, called SAD. seasonal affective depressive disorder. Okay, does that make sense? So these have a little bit of influence on us. They're called infradians. They're not as, well, some people say it has bigger influence on behavior than we give credit for, but some say, yeah, it's there and it's has some impact, but not as strong as some other ones. Okay. The one I've been talking about in the cave that was being thrown off most recognizably, where we were seeing was the circadian rhythms were being thrown off. Circa of a day, circling a day, is the same word, circadian, called a circadian. And that rhythm is the 24-hour one. And that one is primarily with sleep and sleep-wake cycle and body temperature and jet lag, or what we call internal desynchronization. Okay? And that's what they were finding in this situation where they put people in this artificial environment where they couldn't get any sun or any resetting according to clocks, and they were getting jet-lagged individuals basically compared to what was going on right outside that cave. They were getting tired and sleeping an hour later each time, because most of us don't cycle on a 24 if we're not exposed to sunlight. Now, almost all of us will rarely find ourselves in a cave. So
what about like in Alaska, where it's like always sun?
yeah, and there are places in northern hemispheres, let's say like Alaska or northern countries, where the sun is sometimes doesn't come up but for a couple of hours a day. But what's still happening there, it does have an influence on circadian rhythms, but people have other kind of, like clocks remind them, and so their body kind of has other reminders of, and so it resets according to that. But there are issues in northern hemispheres that affect circadian cycles a lot. But they do have other time kind of cues that help them set this. By the way, another one that we don't talk much about is ultra or ultradians. And you can imagine these occur more frequently than once a day. Many of these about every 90 minutes. Can you think of any that occur on a 90-minute basis? We were talking about one already. I mentioned daydreams are on a 90-minute cycle. You're more prone to a daydream about every 90 minutes. 90 minutes are weird ones. One goes like this. You all are breathing. Watch this. Go like this for me and tell me. We only breathe in and out of one nostril at a time. I don't know if you know that, but I'm only breathing right now out of my right nostril. Anybody breathing out of only their right nostril right now? You go like this. And how many are breathing out of their left nostril? You can see the other half of the room. And guess what? If you check your nostril like this, later on today you'll switch. It'll just automatically go over to the other nostril. Did you guys know that?
No, but it makes sense.
It does. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but I'll see you guys walking around campus. You can check it today and go, hey, it switched. So check it in a little bit, and what it'll do, it'll just rotate over. So you breathe in and out of just one nostril, which is always weird things. But it always reminded me of like how psychology can be very helpful and relevant to know these things. Like my little nephew one time was stuck, you know those little plastic grapes that are fake? He put two of them in his nose and was just messing around like that. And one of his cousins, one of my kids, says, ooh, put it in the air and try that. So he's trying all the, in his eye and his mouth, and he put it in his nose. And then he goes, check this out, I'll breathe in and see what happens. And of course, he's breathing out of this nostril. It's not really funny. Well, it is. Because he goes like that, and it went straight up. And we couldn't get it out. And so he still has it. He's now 17, and no, not really, but later on that night, he's like, oh my gosh, he was like freaking out. He's like 10, and you know how kids are. I got a grape in my nose, I can't get it out, and we're trying everything, and we couldn't get it out. And so eventually, we even had a doctor in the house that day, and he was like, I can't get this out. We had to take him to emergency room. But remember, the good news is you only breathe out of one nostril, so only one grape went up. And that's what I was able to share with them. Well, hey, it's good that we go back and forth like this, because otherwise, you'd have both. 90 minutes, we rotate. Other ones, daydreaming. Other ones would be kinds of awareness, but where's the most interesting 90-minute that we've seen and watched? By the way, stomach contractions, Oral behavior, meaning something that you know, some people will chew on the end of a pencil, chew gum, whatever, and that's a 90-minute cycle sometimes. So my wife would go like this. You could test people to see when they get hungry or not. And it's about a 90-minute cycle. You could find out from you. So we ate one night like at 5 o'clock, and we had dinner. And I went like this. I wrote it on. I was sitting there. And I don't remember what I was. And I wanted to see. I wanted to see if Elisa does a 90-minute. And so sure enough, I just wrote down the time. You know, we finished. Let's say at 5 o'clock. And around 6:25, 6:30, she goes, "Hey, I'm getting thirsty. You want some coffee or tea?" And I went, "Oh, hey, no thanks." She goes, "What are you doing?" And I went, "Nothing, man. I'm just looking at the time, just noted the time." And she looked at me, okay. And so she went and did that. And then exactly like 90 minutes later, she was saying, "Hey, I'm getting snacky. Do you want like dessert?" I go, "Yeah, sure." And I marked it down. She goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing, man. I'm just looking at you, thinking about the time and all of that." She goes, "Please don't use me for an experiment in class." And I said, "Lisa, I'll never tell anybody any of this. I promise." But she was like on this 90 minute, almost exactly. She gets hungry and wants to snack and drink, and it's funny. So you can mark that down and see for yourself if it works.
A full-length feature is 90 minutes.
Oh, and a full-length movie feature is about 90 minutes. That's an interesting thing. I wonder if there's any meaning there or why we kind of like that. So, where's the most famous 90-minute or ultradian cycle, which happens to be 90 minutes? The most famous one we see occurs, it's not the breathing, it's not even being hungry every 90 minutes or daydream. It's when a guy, the University of Chicago, in the late 50s, had to do a dissertation and was studying sleep, and he watched his child fall asleep, and his job, one of his research projects, was to watch his kid sleeping, and the kid did something every 90 minutes. What did he do every 90 minutes? He switched and went into a complete weird state that was, he saw it initially as what did he see physically, this kid doing every 90 minutes? His eyeballs his eyes wouldn't open, but they would just underneath his eyelids would go back and forth. Very fast. And he'd go, and the guy's looking at it going, "Ha!" So he marked it down. And then at 90 minutes later, the kid's eyeballs moving back and forth. He's like, "Oh!" And he was the first one to kind of document. People had seen this before, rapid eye movement, while you're sleeping. But he's found the pattern. About every 90 minutes, this kid would fall into every 90 minutes he'd fall into rapid eye movement. And so the most famous ultradian cycle occurs during sleep. Okay, anything about rhythms? And we're going to jump into sleep. Questions about these cycles? Remember, infra, less frequently, ultra, more frequently, like about every 90, and then circa, about a day. All right, you guys want to go into sleep then? Not go to sleep? Talk about sleep? How many, if I turned off the lights, gave you a pillow right now, how many of you would go asleep like within? Oh! Everybody raised their hand. You know what that means? Y'all are sleep deprived. I'm telling you, the majority of you are in sleep deprivation. How many agree that you're in sleep deprivation right now? Look at these hands. How many are going to be in a car sometime today driving? Oh. Ready? Sleep. This is a wacky, strange, interesting phenomenon that humans do that has some element of weirdness to it. How many think sleep is a weird thing? You have to lay down every night and sleep. How many think sleep right now is so awesome, you just love to sleep? How many even talking about it is very pleasant? All right, sleep. Here we go. Some facts, but more importantly, let's start with some questions. Ready? Key questions. You don't have to write these down, but these are unanswered questions. Questions that we're like, I wonder what's going on here. One unanswered question. Why do we sleep more when we're young? Have you ever seen babies? If you haven't been around a baby, man, newborns all day long and all night long, sometimes not together, but overall 20 hours or 18, 19 hours or more as a newborn. And so we're, even as young babies, they're sleeping a lot, napping a lot. What's going on with them is a question. Why do some animals sleep more than others, while others not at all? We'll talk a little bit about that. There are some animals that sleep, for example, with half of a brain, like one eye is open, like that when they sleep. That's a really cool thing. By the way, for like, let's say ducks that sleep on the ground in like groups, the ducks on the inside go like this, both eyes asleep. But if they're on the outside, they're facing all their buddies over here. This eye is closed and this eye is open. The one that's facing the outside. Isn't that interesting? And then they kind of rotate throughout the night, so the ones that were on the outside get to go toward the middle and sleep more deeply, and the ones on the outside from the inside come to the outside. And then there's always a few that never do that. They always stay on the inside. What neurotransmitters are involved in sleep? That's a cool question that some people are researching, and there's some great answers to these, and there's even more being explored. Like I said, I don't think you have to write these down, but these are kind of cool. We all know what it's like when some people don't sleep and breathe at the same time. We call that apnea, and literally that's what happens. They go like this, ready? Someone with apnea goes to sleep, and they're asleep, ready? Now you're asleep. And they stop breathing. And they're not breathing because they're asleep. So what happens? They need to get air. And so they go like that. And then they fall back asleep, and what do? Stop breathing. Like 300-400 times a night, they go into this sleep, stop breathing, snore. And that's why snoring is oftentimes a sign of something very dangerous, which is apnea, because it's very dangerous. People with apnea are at great risk, heart and other body problems because of that. Probably the most important question is, why is sleep necessary and what is the function of sleep? Let's start with that question. What would you think? What have you heard about? What's one function? Why do we sleep? Give me a function or a reason or a purpose.
To let our muscles rest.
Wait, one more time?
Let our muscles rest.
Yeah, it's for like the body to be restored, right? To let our muscles and our bodies kind of relax. And it's almost like it restores us physically. Now it's good. What's another purpose of sleep? Yeah.
Memories from the day into long term.
There's something not only about the body that's restorative, there's something psychologically. Maybe we take memories, right? Things we've learned and they get stored a little bit. So the answer to anybody else, another one, why do we sleep? A purpose or a function? That's good. There's psychological and physiological, and there's the physiological, we could call there's certainly a restorative function of sleep. Even Shakespeare, you don't have to write his quote down. You don't have to draw the picture if you don't want. Shakespeare's quote on sleep is, it knits up the raveled sleeve of care. It's a cool way of describing sleep. It's like throughout the day, your sleeve of care becomes unraveled and it needs to be knitted back up at night, and that's what sleep does. It's a cool twist of phrasing. You don't have to know it, it's just an interesting, but there is a restorative function. But at the end of the day, if you ask people who study sleep, they're going to say that sleep is tied to your brain. It's tied to your brain functioning. It facilitates learning and memory. And if you've paid attention to some of the recent news out there, some new research and others have documented that it does something else. We begin in some capacity at night. Part of the restoration is to remove neurotoxins from the brain itself. And so sleep is tied to this brain functioning in a couple of different ways, psychologically and then even physically in the removing of neurotoxins, okay? So if you have a brain, you're going to sleep. If you're an animal that has a brain, because all animals with brains sleep, Who are some, give me some, do you know any animals that don't sleep a lot? Or any animals that do sleep a lot? Yeah, so on one end you have animals that sleep like 2-3 hours a night. Cows, sheep, horse. They're like 2, 3, 4 hours a night is all at most. And most of them, a lot of them when they sleep have anti-gravity muscles and they can sleep while they're standing. Some of you have tipped over cows. I don't know why, but anybody tipped a cow over here before when the cow was asleep? No one's tipped a cow. You have? On the other end, you have possums, cats, raccoons, animals that sleep a long time. I remember when one of my kids came running in the house, Dad, there's some big old rat, man, and it's in this garage, and it's big, it's like a possum or something. So I go out there, and sure enough, I open up this closet, this door in the garage, and there's a possum who is clearly asleep and clearly uninterested in me. In fact, I open the door like, hello, you got to get out of there. And he's like, whatever, and he goes back to sleep. Like, I'm sorry, there's no whatever. You need to move out. And he's like, and he just goes right back to sleep. Like, wow, they sleep a lot. Cats, raccoons, freshmen. A lot of y'all are sleeping hours. By the way, humans, we're in a different capacity. Fox, rabbits, humans about 8 hours. So I still don't know what the fox says, though. I just don't know what he says.
There's no sound that no one knows. What does the fox say? What the fox say?
Well, that's pretty irritating. So they sleep like about, 9-10 hours. That's a really irritating song, I'll be honest with you. Pow, pow, pow. All animals sleep. Some of us vary. By the way, you are born with a certain amount, and it's closer to about 8.5 to 9 hours. Some of you are short sleepers, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference for some of you all. By the way, there are different stages. We're going to spend some time looking at these stages. Question on sleep.
Why
Yeah.
is it that, because I can't sleep past 9 hours because I get more tired? Why is it?
Yeah. Some people, if you sleep longer than 9 hours, she asked, sometimes it feels like you get even more tired through the day. Does that happen for some of you all? If you oversleep. By the way, we'll talk a little bit about, it depends on if you're sleep deprived. And if you're sleep deprived, you're going to make it up, and your brain's going to want it, and it's going to go into a weird stage, and you're going to go longer than normal. But you're probably going to be tired oftentimes because your brain has spent a whole lot of time in REM sleep, which is not a very relaxing stage. And so sometimes it feels less like when you go to deep sleep, by the way, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, that's the most relaxing sleep. But when you're sleep deprived, your brain jumps right into a different kind of sleep to make it up for the brain. So we deprive people of sleep all the time to see what would happen, and it's way cool. So I'll tell you what happens.
So there's this thing that's happened to me like maybe 2 or 3 times in my life where someone's woken me up from like a really deep sleep, and they ask me a question, and my mouth moves, but I can't say words. It's like my brain takes about a minute or 2 to start working.
Yeah, he says sometimes if he's ever woken up during a deep sleep and he tries to talk, it's like he can't make a sound. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I can make sound, but like it's gibberish.
It's gibberish.
It's like I'm making noise, and then like a minute or 2 later, I can actually talk. It's really weird.
How many have ever kind of, well, this is very interesting because on deep stages of sleep, well, let's find out. How many of you all know that you or someone's told you you've talked in your sleep? Oh, yes. Interesting. And let's see this, ready? Any sleep walkers? Let me see the walkers. Oh. Here's what happens, ready? If you know these stages, you'll see right where this happens, and you'll see why sleepwalking and sleep talking are what's called a deep stage. Yeah. So a conversation while you...
Back to sleep, and then I talked to them later, they're like, oh, did you bring this? And I'm like, when did I say I would?
So she had a conversation with somebody while she was taking a nap, had no idea of the conversation. My brother was like that all the time. He would just talk in his sleep. I don't know if any of y'all have family members that are sleep talkers, and you could go and talk to them. Like I talk to my brother all the time. Hey, Mark. And I was little, I say, and he'd just talk and talk. And I'd try and find things like, hey, where'd you hide the Halloween candy? And he's like, oh yeah, it's really good, huh? I go, yeah, where is it? In the closet? No. It's over there. I go, what? Like where? And he doesn't make any sense. Like, you dummy, talk. He was so bad, one night, there's a knock at the door. It's 10:30 at night. My mom opens the door, and it's the neighbor lady standing there with my brother, who's clearly asleep, on the outside of the house. And my mom was, oh, she goes, uh-huh, he's asleep. He just came over and knocked and asked if Jimmy can play. So I walked him back over here. Could you imagine a parent, your kid walks out across the street and knocks and asks if Jimmy can play? It's a good thing we didn't live like on Imperial Highway or something. He has no memory of this. He has none. You could try and wake him up. First of all, it wouldn't matter because they're in what we call deep sleep. Stages of sleep are weird. By the way, they have certain electrical patterns. The way we know you're in a sleep, the most effective way is by looking at EEGs. That stands for Electroencephalograms. By the way, I took a few of mine just to show you. This is mine. Not really. When I'm awake and attentive, we call those beta waves, okay? Do you see that? The 1 second, that's about a second, and it's just like this. Ready? Your brain goes like this. That electricity, remember, the nerve cells firing, and we hook up and put the simple electrodes around you, and we hear this electricity. When you're awake and non-attentive, kind of it's a little bit higher. It goes like that. Make sense? So I can show you some different brain waves, and we can hook you up and see where you're at in sleep. So I did some for me just to show you. Here's mine whenever I listen to like a politician. I'm like that. I'm just saying, for me, they go on and on. I'm like, okay, I'm out, brain dead. Here's me when I met my wife, Elisa. It was like that. And you see it says, oh baby. It just came in and I went, oh baby. That's what it showed. So this is how we can tell when you're asleep, and it's a true story too, by the way. Your hypnagogic state, some of you are like this in this class. Have you ever been around somebody and they're like this, they're sitting there trying to fight off sleep, and then they go, yeah, like that? Has that happened just even in here? Yeah. By the way, that's a very pleasant moment, isn't it? When you first, the reason I asked you that do you like to sleep, most of you say, I love it. It feels so pleasurable, that moment of going from awake to asleep. It's called the hypnagogic state. It's that shift from awake to asleep. It's very desirable, but it's sometimes a jerky movement. The brain does weird things, and so the body sometimes ready. When you fall asleep, you're like falling into, you start to, we don't have anti-gravity muscles, and so you calm down. But that's oftentimes the body responds with a jerk. So for some of you, when you get married, I know for me, it was about a month or two after married, and we're talking to Elise, I go, Elise, I got to tell you something, man. when you fall asleep before me, man, you just jerk all over the place. And she's like, and she goes, well, Chris, guess what you do when you fall asleep first? Like, oh. But that's what that moment is. It's that kind of jerk sometimes, and sometimes you wake yourself up. How many of y'all do that at night? Here's the weird part, ready? Your brains. How many of y'all you're like in a dream, or you think you're reaching out to like shake somebody's hand or get off a bike, and you're like, oh, I was just grabbing his hand, never mind. Does that happen to y'all? Ready? The brain doesn't like it when your body does movements that it's not in control of. So your body goes, and you're like, oh, I was just reaching out to hit Karen. So this hypnagogic state, it's not a stage, but we can see it happening in people in this kind of momentary change, hypnagogic. So it's the hypnic jerk, they call it. Kind of weird. It's just this jerk.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.